Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special edition Talks, a program organized by the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum ICYF. My name is Amal Ushnan. I am from Algeria, working as expert at Department of International Project at ICYF, and I will be moderating today's session. And I am very delighted and honored to welcome our esteemed guest, His Excellency Ambassador Altay Cengizer, President of the 40th session of the General Conference of the UNESCO. Welcome, Excellency, and thank you very much for joining us. Allow me to give you a brief introduction on His Excellency profile. Ambassador Altay Cengizer was born in Istanbul. He entered the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1979 and served in various capacities at home and abroad. Between 2001 and 2005, he was Deputy Permanent Delegate of Turkey to the UN in New York, and later he was appointed as Ambassador to Tajikistan, where he served between 2005 and 2006. He was also Ambassador of the Republic of Turkey in Dublin from 2009 to 2013, and he has been serving as Turkey's permanent representative to the UNESCO since October 2016. Ambassador Altay Cengizer is a graduate of Bosphorus University, and he has an MA degree in International History from the LCE University and a Diploma on Crisis Management and Conflict Resolution from Columbia University. Between 2007 and 2009, he was a member of the Weatherhead Center of International Affairs at Harvard University. And in today's session, we will discuss the role of UNESCO in the enhancement of youth cultural learning, how to link young people with cultural sphere, and to what extent international institutions can ensure the youth access to culture. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, I would like to give the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Altay Cengizer to enlighten us on youth cultural learning and the efforts of UNESCO in this matter. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ms. Ushtan, dear friends, Taha and others. I'm delighted to be here with you today. Let me first explain what the General Conference President is. Now, UNESCO has three governing bodies. One is myself, the President of the General Conference, and the Director General, Madame Azule, and then the Chairman of the Executive Board. Currently, a gentleman from Equatorial Guinea, Agapito Mokwe. Now, these three governing bodies have different functions. Protocol-wise, I am at the top, but I do not have executive power. While I am the President of the General Conference, I am also the representative of Turkey, as you know, to UNESCO permanent representative. So, it is important that you know this distinction, that I do not executive power, but I'm like, if you, I can put it this way, Reisul Meclis. So, as the Speaker of the Parliament, or the President of the Parliament, because the General Conference is the Parliament, and the General Conference chooses from among its members 58 members for the Executive Board, which is the most important, one of the most important bodies that prepares what the General Conference asked from them for a 2-year period and works with the Secretariat. I have chosen to this position in November 2019, and I won by 28 votes against my Spanish ambassador, who has received 26 votes. So it's always like this in UNESCO. Madame Azule has also been chosen by a single vote against Mr. Al-Habari of Qatar, for instance. So these elections are always very close. I also chair the open-ended working group on governance, because there are a number of questions which we have been trying to address at UNESCO on governance issues. So that's another chapter. And of course, I have a representative capacity. I can convene meetings and all that. Now, I have seen your questions, etc. But these are questions for experts. And the answers to those questions you can find in the internet. The benefits that you can get from me are not about specifics. It is rather the grand picture, if I can ably describe it to you, what's happening in the world, what are we going to from there. This is the benefit you must expect from me. If you have questions on how this is done, etc., then you should call experts. Because I am not responsible for any of those questions, but I know, of course, because I need to know every subject. So I propose that I'd rather speak on what is happening in the world today, what can we do as Muslims, and what are to be expected. I think this will be the right thing to do. So let me start in this way. What is happening? What is happening, of course, goes beyond the pandemic crisis. Many countries are trying to deal with it. Some have dealt it with better. Some are still struggling, like Brazil, New Delhi, and we receive mutations and all that. But of course, this crisis had a direct effect on our daily lives. We have to know how lasting these would be. Now we have these Zoom meetings. From a certain point of view, these are beneficial because it makes easier for people to come together and exchange ideas. But in a certain respect, the techniques that we are employing now do not address the core of the problem, especially in the education sector. Now, when it became apparent that the education sector, mainly in Africa and other regions which do not have enough income, UNESCO has acted quite swiftly and provided some solutions so that the education does not stop there. However, let's imagine that we are a class and I am a teacher. You will not get the same benefit if we were to face-to-face. This is also another thing. So we have a mixed picture. Nothing is definite yet. We will have to follow very closely the evolution of this crisis along with its societal effects. Capitalism will change. There is an agreement on that. Because as we see it until now, only greed does not help in building societies that are resilient and which have more, not, of course, you can never have equality, but at least you can have certain ranges. Even in Davos, Mr. Schwab himself said that there is a need that capitalism as a system, or rather as an economic model, will have to change. And we have seen the reasons for that. And then, as you know, in many countries, you might be experiencing this very event, which is that there is not equal vaccination around the world. Many countries need more vaccinations, but they face great difficulties in reaching those vaccinations. So that is another aspect of the inequalities that we face. Also, I am happy to say I think there is a new understanding around the world that we have to be much more sober and cautious against the planet, against the nature, because as long as we play with it like that, it will come back to us, and it will take a kind of revenge, because if you do not heed the main premises of conservatism, conserving the nature, I mean, environment, then we will face problems. Food security is on the horizon. So all such issues, which we have been neglecting for so long, came to awaken us in a rude way. Change does not happen suddenly. In fact, it is the end of a process, a continuation process. Problems put on top of each other every day, and then suddenly there is a threshold that all the wrongdoings, all whatever we have been doing on a personal level, as well as on societal and international levels, come to strike us. I think this has happened. And many from every class of societies are happy to share that we need a more sober. That is, with sober, I mean a life which is more cognizant of our human frailties, which is more cognizant of our fellow human beings, and that in this world, which is connected all over, from China to Argentina, from Argentina to United States, we are connected. So if someone leaves Buenos Aires with COVID and arrives at San Francisco, let's say, or even Alaska, then there, the chance is that there will be another case of COVID in whatever area. In very specific ways, we have become connected. The corollary is that if we are living in such an interdependent world, don't we have increased responsibilities towards each other? I mean, you said I'm at Harvard, and it was not the LSE University, it's LSE. I studied in international history. So historians tend to be a bit pessimistic. But I prefer to be an informed optimist. And as an informed optimist, I think we will be able altogether make the necessary changes. Of course, there is today an increased geopolitical rivalry in the world. China is emerging, this is happening to that, and that's happening to that. But this has always been the case. There had always been geopolitical rivalry. We have to find ways to go beyond that. And the surest way is to be aware of our interconnectedness. Now, as the Muslim world and as UNESCO, where is the interconnection? UNESCO has been founded, well, there is this philosophical question. Which one precedes, existence or essence? if you believe that essence precedes existence, then we can say that UNESCO was founded in London, because the founding conference in 1945 was in Whitehall. So it was conceived there and given birth in Paris, because the headquarters are here. At the time, a certain euphoria was reigning on the minds of intellectuals and other academics and politicians who have just left a terrible Second World War with all its consequences. So the idea was that, as you know, I'm sure, that through culture, through science, and through education and information later on, we can stop being enemies of each other and build a more resilient society and build the idea of peace in the minds of people. That was very good, and UNESCO, had its heydays. For instance, not the younger generation, but many Egyptians would remember the days of Abu Simbel, when the Abu Simbel, because of the dam being built nearby, was moved intact from one place to another. So this was UNESCO's one of the first successes. Then we talk about South Korea, for instance, how they have developed and all that. But UNESCO was very active in South Korea when it was a much poorer society. So it was the power of education which moved South Korea so much up to the front. The benefits of education, better and more enlarged education, have been seen elsewhere. Then we have our usual cultural matters like the preservation of World Heritage sites and protection of antiquities during civil war and all that. UNESCO is trying its best, but it does not have enough money to run all these. After the United States had decided to leave the organization, but there's a probability that they might wish to return. And that would be fine, because our luxury at UNESCO is that we are not, basically speaking, a political organization. Yes, you can tell me that there is a political side to everything. That's true. There is a political side to even open science, to artificial intelligence, which is one of the newer subjects that UNESCO is leading now, the ethical side of artificial intelligence, open science, culture. These have political aspects, but mind you, none of them are hardcore security interests. So we can be, I always believe, much more comfortable in UNESCO in dealing with each other on a state-to-state level. Is this happening? Yes, it is happening, but it's not happening as well. So that's one thing. What I'm trying to say is that personally, and this has been in my writings, and I have seen said that elsewhere in the open-ended working groups, so that we need a new elan. Every organization, whether or not it's a successful one, needs a new elan that will push the organization further into the future with a new vision, if you say so, or a new sense of ownership, or a new sense of responsibility towards humanity. I have always as president, brought about my fears that there is alienation within UNESCO member states, because UNESCO had turned into the most beautiful building in your street. But since you have been passing every morning and every night from that, in front of that building, you start to say that this is normal. So this is a dilemma, I think, that we are facing now. With the Islamic world, of course, I certainly believe that we have the most large work to do than any other part of the world, because it is high time for us to get into the bigger picture. So many things are happening in the world, and there is a conversation which has been going on since almost 2,000 years between intellectuals of their time, philosophers of that time. We cannot think ourselves as aliens to that conversation. We have to take our part and learn about it and be open about it. So that is very important for this century, if we can, for this, let's say, for the next 20 years, produce intellectuals in every area, not only engineers and doctors, but also philosophers, intellectuals, academicians of first class, then the impact will change. Our impact will change. If you change your impact, then the impact you will receive will also change. I think it is crucial for young generations like you to understand this. This has nothing to do with breaking your shell or anything like that. It is a requirement of this new century. It is still new, by the way, let me say that. In history, we divide centuries not like the usual person does. For instance, for a certain group of historians, including myself, the 19th century has not started on 1800 or 1800. It started in 1789 with the French Revolution. And the 19th century did not end at 31st of December 1899. It ended with the end of the First World War, which shaped many of the regions many of us are living now. So it was a long century. I think the 21st century has not started on 1st of January 2000. It has started. It is starting now. It's starting now because the defining element has been this pandemic. For all sorts of reasons, since this pandemic happened in an interconnected world, the impact was far larger. And it brought certain questions together. Everyone is trying to put its input, his or her input to this. It is still going on. So I think we have a chance if we regard that the 21st century is beginning now. It means we really have time. We really have time to shape up. Yes, everyone needs to be shaped up. It is how the world goes. It's how life it is. You need to shape up in order to respond effectively to the challenges ahead. As Islamic nations, do we have a common problem that we can address altogether? I'm sure there are many. But from a UNESCO viewpoint, it is basically to do with culture, education, science. If we can give chances that our societies also raise individuals who know their responsibilities towards themselves, towards the state, and what can they do with their lives. A certain awareness. Things will change very quickly, and it will be to our benefit. Imagine within 20 years, we hear about so many accomplishments, individual accomplishments, coming from our geography. Imagine that for a minute, and you'll understand what I mean. So, Ms. Ushna, remind me, then I will take questions. So, to revisit those specialist things, I wanted to share these with you and talk about these rather than a very specific element in UNESCO. They are all in UNESCO internet sites. You can find them. And since I am the president, every day trying to enlarge my viewpoints, my angle, how we look to the world. I think there is a certain contrast that we need to be aware of. That contrast is not between Latin America and the Islamic world, or Europe or the Islamic world. It's rather the Pacific, in Southeast Asia and the Islamic world. Those countries, members of the ASEAN, were somehow successful in finding ways to dampen down their mutual misunderstandings or problems. Don't they have problems? They have problems. Myanmar, for instance, today. But think of Singapore, a small island nation made up of Chinese, Indian, and other elements, which is a success story. Every one of you, I believe, would like to go someday to the National University of Singapore, which is a first-class university. How did this happen? Not in your age, but while I was growing up, we always heard about Vietnam. The war was going on in Vietnam, there was Viet Cong, and the Americans were there, etc., etc. Then suddenly, the war stopped. Vietnam reconstituted itself, but we don't hear anymore from Vietnam in that sense. But they have been very successful in economic development. If you have economic development, which is not a zigzagging thing, of course, it should be continuous, it should be shared well among the population, then you have a sensible growth. You can have 12% growth, huge growth, but it might not be sensible as long as it is not shared, or at least on an equitable manner within the population. And there are other success stories. Of course, South Korea. Of course, Japan after the Second World War. So they do have problems between themselves, especially in cultural matters. For instance, one of the most difficult problems we face in UNESCO today is between Japan and South Korea on the one hand, and Japan and China on the other hand. This is about Japanese treatment of Korean nationals or Chinese nationals in Nanking even before the Second World War. But everyone has a different point of view, and they can explain. But what they were able to do was to leave this behind so that they can concentrate on the real issue of development. If you think, like me, that for the Islamic world, development is the main issue, then you will see that we have to concentrate on that. If you have a long list to do, then you will never be able to do the right thing in any of them. We have to understand this. Then, of course, there is the image problem. We have to attack this. How are we going to attack the image problem? Well, remember the photographs of the Irish arriving at the Staten Island in New York. They are poor, they have nothing on themselves. Or other nations, Italians, Sicilians, they arrived in the United States with nothing on them. But the world changed. Today, we have this stigma on us that we are not developing nations and we are terrorists and all that. I don't need to explain. You all know much better than me through your own lives. But how are we going to attack that? By producing first-class individuals that are successful in life. And what they do is relevant to the rest of the world. Imagine again that we have suddenly 300 people rather than singular achievements. For instance, in Chicago, the famous John Hancock Tower, which is a masterpiece of engineering, had been done by a certain Han from Pakistan. But that's it. We need more. The main difference, I gather, between us and the rest of the world is we need to have a new idea of multitudes. When we do one thing in our lives or as a society, we think that that's enough. No, it should be 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50. That will change the whole picture. And then that will enable us to pursue your rights as individuals, as nations, and become much more effective. There's no other way. We have to be realists. And for that, we have to go deeper, as our forefathers did, to ancient Greeks and onwards. We have to know about this as well. We have to be conversant enough with the Western intellectuals. And then they will stop assuming that she or he doesn't know anyway. That is the crux of the issue. That's where the cookie crumbles. And that's the basic message I can give you from United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Better education, more scientists, better and more culture. Culture which is within the universal criteria. We need to get the way out in order to recapture the glory of ancient tower, whatever you call it, what the Islamic world had achieved before. So let me stop here Ms. Ushnan, and I think I have covered a lot
Right.
about what we can do, we should be doing, and all that. And then, of course, I can answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Excellency, for this fruitful lecture and valuable talk. Indeed, youth cultural learning is the right step toward conscious, cohesive, and intellectually prospering societies and countries. Now we can move to the questions. And the first one, you mentioned, Excellency, that the UNESCO conference is the legislative body and not the executive body. So we are wondering if there are any resolutions adopted by the UNESCO conference in the favor of youth and their cultural learning and education.
Can you repeat the last sentence?
I asked that, is there any resolutions adopted by the UNESCO conference in the favor of youth and their cultural learning and education?
Yes, there are many. I can give you a few examples even.
Yes.
Firstly, UNESCO and the Agenda 2030 positions regard youth as a critical agent of change. Then if you are the agents of change, then mobilizing you, the youth, to advance the sustainable development goals is one of the aims of UNESCO. And then there is this UNESCO Global Youth Community, as I'm sure you know. It's an innovative youth platform. It brings together different youth engagements streams to facilitate both a horizontal youth-to-youth collaboration through dialogue and other means. Also, prevention of violent extremism is at the top of the agenda, one of those subjects. And in that respect, there are youth empowerment programs in many Islamic countries like Jordan, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia. Then we have UNESCO World Heritage Volunteers, again, a youth organization. It brings together young people for concrete preservation activities and awareness raising campaigns for the protection of the preservation of our common cultural and natural heritage. So UNESCO is very much in trying to expand its relations with the youth. There are certain prizes, for instance, UNESCO Bangladesh Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman International Prize for Creative Economy, empowering young people in disadvantaged areas is another policy. So then youth is very much engaged in Creative Cities Network. I'm sure you know about the Creative Cities Network, and there is a certain youth dimension to it. For instance, the Aswan, that was the dam, Aswan Dam. It's a huge dam, and then that's why Abu Simbel of it from ancient Egypt had to be removed. There's the Aswan Creative Youth Forum, which you might be interested. And this is the basic approach of UNESCO. So there are always decisions taken at the General Conference to have better to empower the youth. And the basic understanding is there. Without the participation of youth, everything will be shortcuts and not be achieved. So the participation of youth is crucial. In that respect, there is no problem. But what you can do is to work with your UNESCO national commissions at your own countries to find more about these and become more engaged.
Thank you very much, Excellency. You mentioned here Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Award, and as ICYF, we are also organizing Sheikh Hasina Award under Dhaka OIC Youth Capital, which is a yearly program organized by ICYF. And here I would like to invite all the participants who are present with us to check both the UNESCO website and to read those important and significant resolutions that you mentioned, and also to check Dhaka OIC Youth Capital and to apply for these important programs and awards. Thank you very much. We have another question from Mr. Baraki Sonko from Africa. I wish he wrote his country, but I cannot see it. He's saying, looking at the world education trends, majority of Muslim countries lag behind their counterparts in all aspects. So what UNESCO is doing in order to bridge this gap between the Western countries and the Muslim countries?
But that's a very big, difficult issue. UNESCO, there are two main directing ideas and programs in UNESCO. One is Priority Africa, and the other is gender equality. So UNESCO is doing much to further education in Africa. But this divergence between West and the East didn't come about 30 years ago, 10 years ago. So it will take time, whatever we do. And to tell you the truth, UNESCO is not that strong nowadays as it used to be due to financial problems. So, of course, it is not Latin America or Southeast Asia or any other region, but it's Africa. And we have been trying to enhance our already strong presence in Africa. But I understand and sympathize with them. The East-West question is the big conundrum. And even UNESCO can have a very limited effect on that. But incrementalism is also very important. If with each year, even if they be incremental, we continue to make progress, then there will be a threshold again, which I referred to.
Thank you very much. Actually, having you with us is a great opportunity, and we don't want to lose it, and we would like to benefit from your outstanding experience. So if Your Excellency can give an advice to the youth who are present with us today on the importance of cultural learning and the power of education, especially those in the Muslim world, to close with this advice.
But again, I will have the same things to say. You are individuals. That means you have certain responsibilities towards your societies, towards your culture, but also towards yourself as well. Whatever you do, whatever you learn, even if it seems irrelevant at today, will come in handy another day. So you cannot do enough as much if you expand your educational horizons and try to become the best in your fields. And of course, this goes through with women as with men. Once you have that capacity built, it means you are going to have different angles. That would mean you will have different ideas on solutions. As I am an elder person now, but I'm looking back at my days when I was young, I can see that this could have been better, that could have been better, etc. But no regrets. The point is, you must first yourself be sure that you have given your best. And Islamic or not, it will not change. Even if you are Argentinian or Canadian, whatever, it's the same thing. You will have to do the best. The difference is this. When a person from a developed country does his best, he will be recognized very soon. But if we even do our best, it will take time for us to be recognized as such. And this is because of the stigma. So we have to deal with this. Again, having 100 famous persons is something, having 1,000 famous persons is something else, achieved persons in their societies. So this is the way to go. You should never lose your confidence, not to yourself, not to your country, because we have entered a new world. And what will probably come after this will be more beneficial, because it has been our tenets that are understood much better today. I mean, a sober life, for instance. So I say that, really.
Thank you very much, Excellency, Ambassador Altay Cengizer, for the informative and interesting talk. It was a cultural learning session, actually, and we
Yes.
are looking forward to meet you in other programs. Thank you very much. On behalf of ICYF Secretariat, ICYF President, Mr. Taha Ayhan, and all the participants who are attending with us this interesting session, thank you very much. Also, I would like to thank our audience for attending the session and for the question. And I cannot conclude without thanking also the ICYF technical team for all their efforts in ensuring a smooth implementation of today's session. Stay safe and healthy. See you soon. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Thank you.